The legal document arrived on a Tuesday. It was a single crisp page that made it official. Benjamin Miller, missing for 3 years, was now declared deceased. Amelia stared at the words, feeling nothing. The long-awaited finality didn't bring a new wave of grief. That well had run dry 2 years ago. Instead, it left a hollow space, a silent room where the ghost of her husband had finally stopped rattling the furniture. For 36 months, she had been Benjamin Miller's widow. Now she was just Amelia. A 35-year-old single mother sitting at her kitchen table in a quiet Chicago suburb, the autumn sun casting long shadows across the Formica. Her son, Danny, was at school. The house was so still she could hear the hum of the refrigerator. This was her life. A meticulously managed routine of remote IT work, packed lunches, soccer practice, and a silence so profound it sometimes felt like a physical weight. The trip to the Rockies had been Ben's idea, of course. A boys' weekend of snowmobiling with his college buddies, a last hurrah before he turned 40. He was an expert rider, she had told the police, the park rangers, the sympathetic faces at the funeral service that had no casket. The weather had turned unexpectedly warm, the ice on the lake treacherous. A sudden crack, a tragic accident. The search and rescue teams had combated the fierce undercurrent for a week. They never found his body. The first year was a blur of tears, frozen meals, and holding a confused 5-year-old who kept asking when Daddy's adventure would be over. The second year was numbness, moving through the motions. The third year was quiet. A life put on permanent pause. The CEO of Ben's old firm, Robert, had been kind. He'd helped navigate the grim legalities, the life insurance, the probate. He'd even offered her a flexible remote position, a lifeline that allowed her to be home for Danny. She was grateful, and she was trapped. Her world had shrunk to the dimensions of this house and her son's needs. Enough. The thought didn't arrive with a bang, but as a quiet, solid certainty, like a stone settling at the bottom of a clear pond. It was a Tuesday. She was 35. She was alive. She looked at the date on the declaration document. 3 years to the day since Ben had kissed her goodbye, his breath smelling of coffee, and his smile not quite reaching his eyes those last few months. She closed the folder and pushed it aside. Opening her laptop, she ignored the work emails and went straight to a travel site she hadn't visited in a lifetime. The screen flooded with vibrant, impossible colors. Turquoise water, white sand, palm trees silhouetted against orange sunsets. For 3 years her world had been shades of gray and navy blue. This was an assault of joy. Her finger hovered over the trackpad. All-inclusive Cancun, Bahamas family fun, Dominican paradise. A memory surfaced, sharp and sweet. Herself at 22, laughing on a South Beach dance floor with her girlfriends, the Miami heat a warm blanket, the future a wide-open road. She'd gone back later, with Ben, when Danny was a baby. It had been happy. She bypassed the international deals. She wasn't ready for passports and foreign languages. She typed Miami. The images were familiar, yet new. It wasn't running away. It was a deliberate step towards something, towards sunlight, towards a version of herself she hadn't seen in years. She booked a non-refundable 1-week package for 2, a hotel on the beach, ocean view. When Danny came home, his backpack swinging, she was waiting with cookies. "Hey, buddy, how was school?" "Fine, we're building volcanoes." "Awesome. Listen, how would you feel about building some sandcastles instead? Next week, in Florida." His eyes, so like Ben's, went wide. "For real? On a plane? For real? On a plane?" Just you and me?" As he cheered, a strange sensation bloomed in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it. It wasn't happiness, not yet. It was the faint, thrilling tremor of a bridge being crossed, of a door being unlocked after a very long time. The ghost was laid to rest by the state of Illinois. Now it was time for Amelia Miller to finally, fully come back to life. The Miami sun was a promise, but O'Hare International was a damp, gray purgatory. Amelia navigated the chaos with a practiced calm, one hand on her roller bag, the other firmly holding Danny's. Her son buzzed with an energy that felt alien in the somber cathedral of Terminal 3. Every detail was a tripwire. The smell of overpriced coffee and jet fuel. The robotic voice announcing departures. The last time she'd been here, it was with Ben. A second honeymoon trip to Turks and Caicos. A desperate attempt to stitch their fraying marriage back together. Danny had been left with her mother. The vacation had been a beautiful, silent failure. They'd returned more like polite roommates than husband and wife. Stop it. She squeezed Danny's hand. New memories. That's the point. "Mom, look, our gate," Danny pointed, pulling her toward the bustling waiting area. They found seats near the window. Amelia busied herself with passports and boarding passes, a ritual to keep the ghosts at bay. She observed the other passengers, a group of boisterous frat boys in matching tank tops, an elderly couple holding hands. A few rows away, a striking couple sat in tense silence. The woman was young, mid-20s, with artfully tousled blonde hair and oversized sunglasses, her attention locked on her phone. The man wore a stylish, wide-brimmed Panama hat and dark aviators, his face angled away, speaking to her in low, insistent tones she completely ignored. There was an uncomfortable intimacy to their disconnect. Amelia looked away, a familiar pang of something between pity and recognition hitting her chest. Boarding was called. They found their seats, Danny thrilled by the window, Amelia on the aisle. As the plane taxied and roared into the sky, Danny pressed his nose to the plastic portal, captivated. Amelia leaned back, closing her eyes, forcing herself to breathe. This was progress. This was moving forward. An hour into the flight, Danny squirmed. "Mom, I gotta go." "Okay, buddy. You see the little light? It's in the front. You can go yourself, but ask the flight attendant if you need help." "I'm 8, Mom. I got it," he said, with exaggerated dignity. She watched him march up the aisle, a small figure in an oversized hoodie. He disappeared into the forward lavatory. The plane gave a gentle sway. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We're expecting a bit of turbulence ahead. Please return to your seats and fasten your seat belts." The plane bucked slightly. Amelia's eyes flicked to the front. The seatbelt sign dinged on. Danny should be out by now. A prickle of worry started at the base of her neck. Just as the shaking intensified, the lavatory door opened. Danny emerged. He took 2 steps down the aisle, then froze. His head turned, his body went rigid. His gaze locked on something or someone in the seats behind Amelia. The plane jolted again, but he didn't stumble. He just stared, his face draining of color. Then he moved, fast, almost running back to his seat. He scrambled over Amelia's legs and shoved himself against the window, trembling. "Sweetheart, what's wrong? Did the turbulence scare you?" She put a hand on his arm. It was cold. He turned to her, his eyes huge and dark with a fear she hadn't seen since he was a toddler. His voice was a thin, reedy whisper, barely audible over the engine's drone. "I saw Dad." The words didn't make sense. They were nonsense syllables. What? In the back? He was sitting there, with a lady. The world narrowed to the hum of the air vent above them. A cold, heavy dread poured into her stomach. Danny, no. You must have seen someone who looked like him. It happens. People have doppelgangers. It was him. His whisper was fierce, insistent. His hair was shorter, like this. He made a chopping motion above his ear, but it was his face. He was just sitting there. Rational Amelia, the mother who fixed scraped knees and explained away monsters under the bed, took over. Her voice was calm, a soothing balm she did not feel. Honey, think. It was probably just a man with a similar jawline or the same color jacket. You were thinking about Dad because we're on a trip, and your brain played a trick. It's called suggestion. He shook his head stubbornly, curling into himself, refusing to look at her. He believed what he saw with the absolute faith of a child. For the remaining hour of the flight, Amelia sat perfectly still, a smile plastered on her face for Danny's benefit. Inside, a storm raged. It's impossible, it's trauma. It's a cruel coincidence. But beneath the logic, a seed of primal, terrifying doubt had been planted. What if the one thing she had accepted as immutable truth, his death, was a lie? After landing, she let the herd of passengers disembark first. She needed time, distance. As they finally gathered their bags from the overhead bin, she casually glanced toward the rear of the plane. The couple with the hat and the blonde was gone. At baggage claim, she saw the man again. He was lifting a sleek black suitcase off the carousel. He turned, and for a split second, the overhead lights caught his profile as he placed his hat back on his head. The angle, the set of his shoulders, and just below his jawline, a small, dark spot. A mole. Her breath hitched. No. Millions of men have moles. It was a coincidence stacked upon a coincidence becoming unstable. She had to know. Spying a uniformed airline employee at a nearby service desk, she made a decision. Stay right here with the bags, she told Danny, her voice bright. Mommy just needs to ask a quick question. Approaching the desk, she leaned in. Excuse me, I'm so sorry to bother you. My son, he thinks he saw a relative on the flight. Could you possibly check your manifest? A passenger named Benjamin Miller? It would put his mind at ease. It was a breach of protocol, and she knew it. The agent, a weary-looking woman, frowned. Ma'am, I can't give out passenger information. It's against— Please, Amelia interrupted, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. She glanced meaningfully at Danny, who was watching them curiously. His father. He passed away several years ago. It's been very hard for him. The woman's eyes softened. She looked at Danny's hopeful, anxious face, then back at Amelia's strained one. With a sigh, she tapped on her keyboard, her screen angled away. Flight 422 from Chicago, she murmured. Yes. A few more clicks. She shook her head. No Benjamin Miller on that flight manifest. I'm sorry. The relief was so sudden and profound it felt like vertigo. Thank you. Thank you so much. She walked back to Danny, her legs slightly weak. See, sweetie, the nice lady checked. It wasn't him. Just someone who looked a lot like him. She ruffled his hair, the lie smooth and comforting on her tongue. Our brains can play funny tricks, especially when we're tired and excited. Danny shrugged, the intensity of his conviction already fading, replaced by the imminent promise of a swimming pool. Okay, can we get a smoothie? As they rode the taxi to their hotel, Amelia stared out at the palm trees and Art Deco buildings, the vibrant postcard of Miami. She had the confirmation she needed. It was all a horrible emotional mirage. She told herself she believed it. She almost did. But in the deepest, most guarded vault of her mind, the seed of doubt, watered by the sight of that mole, had quietly taken root. The first 3 days were a perfect, sun-drenched trance. Miami worked its magic with brutal efficiency. The hotel pool was a turquoise jewel, the ocean a vast, rhythmic sigh. Danny's laughter, unburdened and frequent, became the soundtrack of their days. Amelia, slathered in SPF 50 and hidden behind large sunglasses, allowed herself to exist in the present tense. The phantom on the plane was relegated to a mental folder labeled Stress-Induced Hallucination, Danny's. She refused to open it. Their room was on the 8th floor, with a small balcony overlooking a slice of sea and the hotel's lush, tiered garden below. Evenings became Amelia's ritual. She would send Danny to shower off the salt and sand, pour herself a glass of chilled white wine from the minibar, and step outside. Standing at the railing, watching the sky bleed from orange to violet to indigo, was her daily meditation. It was here, in the quiet hum of the city and the distant crash of waves, that she felt the tight coil inside her chest begin, slowly, to unwind. On the 4th evening, the sky was quilted with thick gray clouds, muting the sunset. The air felt heavy, pregnant, with unshed rain. Amelia stood on the balcony anyway, the ritual itself now a comfort. She was about to go back inside when raised voices floated up from the balcony directly below. A woman's voice, shrill and dripping with contempt. "So what? You think a few nights at this place counts as providing for me? I need experiences, Ben. I need a life." Amelia froze. The name was a common one, a coincidence. She didn't move. The man's response was lower, harder to make out, but the tone was one of exasperated control. Then a phrase, clear as a bell in the humid air. "Trying to teach you something, for God's sake, make you smarter." The woman, Ashley, the man had called her, snorted. "You're such a drag. You're what, 40? You act like you're 60. There was a beat of silence. Then the man's voice came again, quieter, colder, and with a cadence that sliced through the years and struck Amelia directly in the sternum. "Let me tell you something, Ashley. You keep this up, chasing the next shiny thing, and what will you have left? You'll be 40, with the mind of a 12-year-old. The world tilted. The railing under her hands was the only solid thing in the universe. What will you have left? It was his phrase. Benjamin Miller's rhetorical kill shot. The one he deployed in every serious argument. With her, with business partners, once even with a stubborn mechanic. It was uniquely his, a verbal fingerprint. Logic screamed. A common saying, a turn of phrase, but her blood, her bones, knew the truth. The timbre, the weary, condescending delivery. It was him. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She remained statue still, listening, but the argument descended into muffled accusations and the sound of a sliding door being yanked open and shut with violent force. Silence. She had to see. She crept to the edge of her balcony and peered down at an angle. The balcony below was empty. But a moment later, the door slid open again. A man stepped out, alone. He braced his hands on his railing, head bowed. He was wearing a white linen shirt, sleeves rolled up. His hair was indeed shorter, neater than Ben's tousled style had been, shot through with more silver at the temples. But the build, the posture, the slope of his shoulders as he sighed. It was a silhouette she had watched walk away 1,000 times. He turned to go back inside, and the balcony light caught his face for a split second. It was enough. The breath left her body in a silent gasp. The mole. Right there, just below the left corner of his jaw. The same one Danny had pointed to in 100 photographs. The one she used to tease him about. Proof. Dreadful, undeniable proof. The ghost was flesh and blood, living 1 floor below her. A wild, reckless fury, hot and clean, burned through the shock. She wasn't a grieving widow. She was a fool, a dupe. And he was here, drinking and fighting with some girl named Ashley. An hour later, found herself in the hotel's dim, tiki-themed bar. It wasn't a plan. It was a compulsion. She needed to see him, to test reality against her own eyes. She chose a stool at the far end of the curved bar, half hidden by a giant potted fern, and ordered a club soda with lime. He walked in, 20 minutes later, alone. He looked tired, older. He took a stool a few seats down and ordered a bourbon, neat. He drank it quickly, ordered another. The polished, irritated man from the balcony was gone, replaced by something looser, more morose. The alcohol was doing its work. Amelia watched in the back bar mirror. On his third drink, he swiveled slightly, his gaze drifting and landing vaguely in her direction. "Rough night?" he asked, his words slightly slurred. She kept her face angled away, her voice low and neutral. "Isn't it always something?" He gave a hollow laugh. "With women? Yeah, it's always something." He took a sip. "Why are they so complicated?" Amelia felt a savage thrill. He was talking to her. The absurdity of it was dizzying. Maybe the problem isn't the women. Maybe it's the men who keep choosing the complicated ones. He turned more fully now, squinting at her profile in the dim light. "You sound like you know what you're talking about." "I know that if you pick a trophy, don't be surprised when all it does is collect dust." The words were venomous, meant for him, but spoken to a stranger. He was quiet for a moment, then sighed. "Maybe. But there's an energy. You can't deny that." "The ability to control your most basic impulses," she said, her voice like ice, "is literally what separates us from animals. Or so I've heard." She finally risked a glance sideways. He was looking at her, his head cocked. The bourbon had softened his features, but his eyes, Ben's intelligent, probing hazel eyes, were trying to focus. In that moment, the light from a neon cocktail sign fell directly on the side of his neck. There it was, the mole, an anchor point in a spinning world. Any last vestige of doubt evaporated. This was not a doppelganger. This was Benjamin Miller, breathing the same air, swimming in self-pity and cheap bourbon. A fresh wave of nausea hit her. She stood up, tossing a bill on the bar. "Good luck with your energy." "Hey, wait," he began. But she was already walking away, her steps steady and deliberate, until she was out of the bar, down the hall, and in the elevator. Alone in the mirrored cubicle, she finally let herself shake. It wasn't grief. It was the seismic aftershock of a foundational truth collapsing. Her husband was alive. The last 3 years of her life, the grief, the quiet, the suspended animation, were built on a lie. And the architect of that lie was currently drinking himself into a stupor 70 feet away. The vacation was over. Something else had begun. The next morning, routine was a flimsy shield. Amelia moved through the motions of sunscreen and packing the beach bag with a robotic efficiency. Her mind was a war zone, replaying the voice, the profile, the mole, the undeniable aliveness of him. Danny chattered about snorkels and sand dollars, a blissful counterpoint to her inner turmoil. She chose their spot on the beach with the strategic precision of a general. It was several rows back from the water, partially shaded by a tall palm. But most importantly, it offered a clear sight line to the pair of loungers, where he and Ashley had planted themselves earlier. She wore her largest hat and darkest sunglasses, not just against the sun, but as armor. From her vantage point, she watched the silent movie of their dysfunction. Ashley, in a microscopic bikini, was a statue of displeasure, radiating boredom into her phone. Ben, she had to force herself to think the name now, lay beside her, eyes closed, his face tense even in repose. The easy charm he'd once wielded was gone, sanded down into something brittle and irritated. Their argument started as a low hum, then rose on the still, hot air. "I can't believe you got loungers this far back." Ashley's voice, petulant and clear, carried over. "I feel like I'm in the cheap seats." "The cheap seats are what's available at 11 a.m., Ben replied, his voice a tight wire. "If you wanted front row, you should have gotten up with me." "I was tired. Someone kept me up arguing." "You're impossible." Amelia watched, a cold spectator. She saw Ben sit up, reach for a bottle of water, and drain it. He wiped his forehead. Even from a distance, he looked pale beneath his tan. The previous night's bourbon and today's blistering sun were a toxic combination. Ashley said something else, sharp and dismissive. Ben started to retort, then stopped. He swayed, putting a hand to his temple. Amelia's own body tensed, a purely instinctive response she hated. Then it happened. His eyes lost focus. He tried to stand, perhaps to walk away from the argument, but his legs buckled. He didn't crumple dramatically. He just sank, a marionette with cut strings, onto the hot sand between the loungers. For a second, Ashley just stared. Then she let out a short, sharp shriek. "Ben! Oh my God! Ben!" She knelt beside him, patting his cheek, her gestures frantic and useless. "Somebody help! Help him!" The other beachgoers looked over, a ripple of concern moving through the sunbathers, but no one immediately moved. It was the paralysis of a crowd, unsure of the script. Amelia was on her feet before the decision had fully formed in her mind. "Danny, stay here. Do not move." Her voice left no room for argument. She crossed the sand in quick, sure strides. The mother, the former wife, the person who had once known this man's body almost as well as her own, overriding the furious stranger within. "Move aside," she said to Ashley, her tone not unkind, but brooking no dissent. The younger woman gaped at her, scooting back on her heels. Amelia dropped to her knees in the sand. The heat was intense. She pressed 2 fingers to the side of his neck. A pulse, thready but there. His skin was clammy and burning hot. She leaned close, her ear near his mouth. A shallow, ragged breath tickled her skin. Heat stroke, or severe dehydration, exacerbated by alcohol and stress. The diagnosis clicked into place with calm certainty. "Get an umbrella, a towel, anything to shade him," she instructed Ashley, who stared blankly. "Now, and go get the hotel medic. Run!" The command snapped Ashley into motion. She stumbled up and took off toward the hotel, still screaming for help. Amelia focused. She straightened his legs, then gently rolled him onto his side into the recovery position, careful to keep his airway open. A man from a nearby lounger hurried over with a large beach umbrella and held it aloft, casting a circle of shade. "Thank you," Amelia murmured, Her entire world narrowed to the man on the sand. She was aware of Danny watching, wide-eyed, from their spot. She was aware of the small ring of onlookers. But it all felt distant. Here, in this urgent physical space, there was no past, no betrayal. There was only a body in distress and the ingrained need to fix it. His eyelids fluttered. A low groan escaped his lips. He blinked, disoriented, his gaze swimming before focusing on the face hovering above him. Recognition, slow and drugged, dawned in his hazel eyes. They widened. His cracked lips moved, forming a silent word, then a breath of sound so faint only she could hear it, carried on the salt breeze. Amelia? Her name. In his voice. For the first time in over 3 years. A bolt of pure, undiluted electricity shot through her. Every hair on her arms stood up. In that single whispered syllable was the confirmation of everything. The shared history, the intimate knowledge, the colossal lie. He saw her, not a helpful stranger. Time snapped back into frantic motion. "Don't try to talk," she said, her voice miraculously steady, a nurse's tone. She broke eye contact, looking toward the hotel path. "The medic is coming." She saw Ashley sprinting back, followed by a man in hotel uniform carrying a small medical kit. The spell was broken. The moment of terrifying intimacy was over. As the hotel medic knelt, checking vitals and prepping a cool pack, Amelia stood up. Her knees were sandy and weak. She backed away, melting from the center of the circle, just as the professional took over. "Probably heat exhaustion, maybe mild heat stroke," the medic was saying to a sobbing Ashley. "We need to get him to a cool room, hydrate him. He'll be okay." Ben's head lolled to the side, his eyes searching the dispersing crowd, looking for her. But Amelia was already turning, walking back to her son, to her bag, to her own life. She had stepped into the wreckage of his, just for a moment, and his unconscious whisper had branded her. He knew she was here. The fragile anonymity of her new beginning was shattered. The game of silent observation was over. The ghost was not only alive, he had seen her, and he knew that she knew. The knock on the door, when it came, was firm, predictable. Amelia had been sitting in the dark for an hour, Danny finally asleep after a million questions about the sick man on the beach. She'd soothed him with bland assurances, her mind screaming. She opened the door. He stood in the corridor, washed out in the fluorescent light. He looked older than he had on the beach, stripped of bravado and bourbon. Pale, shadows under his eyes. He'd changed into a simple gray t-shirt and khakis. "Amelia." Her name was a statement this time, heavy with everything unsaid. She didn't move to let him in. She just stood there, blocking the doorway, her arms crossed. "How did you find the room?" "The concierge. I said I was Benjamin White, an old family friend. I gave your name." A ghost of his old, charming smile tried to surface, and died. They were helpful. Benjamin White. The new name was a punch to the gut. So final. So deliberate. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low, urgent. "Please." The rational part of her wanted to slam the door, to call security, to protect the fragile peace she'd just started to build. But the part of her that had spent 3 years burying a man who wasn't dead, the part that deserved answers more than she deserved peace, won out. "Not here. Danny's asleep. The hotel bar. In an hour." She didn't wait for his agreement. She closed the door softly, her hand trembling on the latch. She spent the next 60 minutes in a cold, silent fury. She changed into dark jeans and a simple black top. Armor. She checked on Danny, his peaceful sleep a stark contrast to the storm inside her. Then she walked out, leaving the hallway light on for him, and descended into the belly of the hotel. The bar was quieter tonight. She chose a small, high-backed booth in the darkest corner, facing the entrance. When he arrived, he spotted her immediately. He looked like a man walking to his own sentencing. He slid into the opposite seat. Don't, she cut him off, her voice like shaved ice. Don't you dare say I look well or tired or anything, just talk. He flinched, nodded. A waiter appeared. Club soda, Amelia said, not taking her eyes off Ben. Bourbon. Neat, he muttered. They sat in silence until the drinks came. He took a long swallow, his hands not quite steady. Start from the beginning, she commanded. The real beginning, not the fairy tale they put in the report. He took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the amber liquid in his glass. The firm was in trouble, not the public face of it, but my division. I made a bad call, a big one. Got us into bed with what turned out to be a venture capital group with ties. They were laundering money through legitimate-looking startups, ours included. The words came out in a flat, practiced monotone, as if he'd rehearsed this confession in his head 1,000 times. When I realized what was happening, it was too late. We were in deep. I tried to pull out. That's when the threats started. Not to me at first. Vague messages about family being collateral. A picture of Danny coming out of his preschool, sent to my private email. Amelia's blood ran cold. She remembered that time. Ben had been paranoid, installing a new home security system, insisting on driving Danny to school himself. He'd said it was just being cautious in a big city. I went to the police. They said without concrete evidence of a direct threat, it was a civil matter. The debt was real. The contracts were binding. These people, they were ghosts, in suits, untouchable. He finally looked at her, his eyes pleading for her to understand the trap. I was backed into a corner, every day, waiting for the other shoe to drop. On you. On him. So, you decided to die. Her statement was devoid of empathy. It was Robert's idea, he said quickly, defensively. The CEO. He knew some of it. He said the only way to make the debt and the threat disappear with me was if I disappeared. The snowmobiling trip, it was a cover. We had a guy on the rescue team. It was all arranged, the accident, the search, the conclusion. He'd orchestrated his own death with an accomplice while she was at home, teaching Danny how to tie his shoes and waiting for a call that would never come. I thought it was the only way to protect you both, he whispered, the words hollow. If I was gone, the debt died with me. You'd get the life insurance, the estate. You'd be safe. A bitter, incredulous laugh escaped her. Safe? You think you made us safe? You left me a widow at 32 with a 5-year-old who asked for his daddy every night for a year. You left me to explain to our son that his father was gone forever because of a stupid, reckless accident. That is not safety, Ben. That is cowardice. That is emotional annihilation. He recoiled as if struck. I know. God, Amelia, I know that now. I thought you'd move on. Find someone better. That Danny would adjust. Adjust? The word was a venomous hiss. You don't get to use words like that. You forfeited that right when you chose the most traumatic exit possible. I was desperate, he insisted, his voice rising before he forced it down. And for what it's worth, it worked. The pressure stopped. Robert said the group was investigated by the feds about 6 months later. Dismantled. The debt was voided. The threat was gone. "So why stay dead?" she asked, her voice dangerously calm. "If the coast was clear, why not come back? A year ago, 2?" He looked down, a mask of shame settling over his features. "By then, I was someone else, Benjamin White. I had started over. A small consulting firm, nothing fancy. And I figured you had rebuilt. That showing up would just be another bomb on your doorstep. I thought my coming back would hurt you more than my staying dead." It was the most selfish part of the confession, cloaked in a pathetic veneer of altruism. He'd chosen his new, unencumbered life over the messy, painful truth. "And Ashley?" Amelia asked, the name tasting like acid. He had the decency to look utterly defeated. "A mistake. A lonely, stupid mistake. She's not you. No one is." He reached for his drink, drained it. "The last 3 years have been a hell of my own making, Amelia. I see that now. Every day. Seeing you today, it made everything real again. The guilt. It's been eating me alive longer than you know." She studied him. The lines of strain, the silver in his hair, the raw honesty in his tired eyes. She believed his fear. She believed his guilt. She even believed in some twisted way he thought he was protecting them. But belief didn't equal absolution. "You took 3 years of my life," she said, her voice finally cracking with the weight of it. "You took a father from your son. You let me mourn you. You let me bury an empty box. You don't get to come back now with a sad story and a new name and think that fixes anything. Your hell? You built it. You live in it." He had no answer. There was none. He just sat there, hollowed out by her judgment, which was far more devastating than any he'd passed on himself. The silence between them was absolute, filled with the ghosts of the years he'd stolen. Finally he spoke, his voice barely audible. "What do I do now?" Amelia pushed her untouched club soda away. "That," she said, standing up, "is no longer my problem to solve. You wanted a new life, Ben, or Benjamin White. You got it. Live it." She walked out of the bar, leaving him alone with the ruins of his confession and the crushing understanding that some truths, once revealed, offer no path back, only a stark, unyielding forward into the consequences. The morning after the confession dawned with a brutal, cheerful Miami clarity. Sunlight poured into the room, mocking the dark circles under Amelia's eyes. She felt scraped raw, her emotions a tangled knot of fury, pity, and a treacherous, unwanted understanding. Danny, however, was a sunbeam incarnate, bouncing on his bed. "Can we see the man from the beach again today? The one who got sick?" The innocent question was a needle to her heart. "We might, buddy. We'll see," she said, her voice too bright. She spent the morning on the beach with Danny, but her vigilance was now directed inward, guarding against the pull of Ben's story. The trap wasn't just his lies, it was the potential for a narrative where he was a flawed hero, not a villain. She couldn't afford that story. The text came just before lunch, from a number not in her contacts. "I understand if you never want to see me again, but please just once let me see my son. I won't say anything unless you want me to. I just need to see him." Ben. It was the one request she was defenseless against. Danny was his son. She had spent years protecting Danny from the pain of loss. Now she had to navigate the greater minefield of introducing a living ghost. Denying the meeting felt like vengeance, and using a child for vengeance was a line she wouldn't cross. She took a deep breath and texted back, "Hotel Cafe. Tomorrow, 11 a.m. I will prepare him. You will follow my lead." The next hour was one of the hardest of her life. She sat Danny down on the edge of his bed, her heart pounding. "Hey, remember the man on the plane you thought was Daddy? And the sick man on the beach?" Danny's eyes grew serious. "Yeah. You were right, sweetie. Both times. It was him." Danny's mouth fell open. A kaleidoscope of emotions crossed his face. Confusion, wonder, a dawning, incredible joy. "He's alive? But you said—" "The mountain? I was wrong. He was lost for a very, very long time on a work trip that went bad. But he's back now, and he really, really wants to see you." "Is he coming here?" Danny scrambled off the bed, vibrating with excitement. "Tomorrow, for breakfast." "But Danny—" She took his small hands in hers, forcing him to focus on her face. "Things are different now. He's been gone a long time. It might feel a little strange at first, okay? For both of you." "Okay," Danny said, already hurtling past her caution into the thrilling prospect. The boy, who had accepted his father's absence as a sad fact of life, now had it spectacularly reversed. For him, it was pure miracle. Amelia felt sick. The following morning, she dressed Danny in his nicest shirt. She wore her own armor, a neutral linen dress, her hair pulled back, a mask of calm composure. They entered the cafe, and she saw him immediately. Ben was already at a corner table wearing a pressed polo shirt, his hands clasped tightly around a coffee mug. He looked like he hadn't slept. Danny spotted him and froze for a second, his small hand tightening in Amelia's. Then, a shy smile broke out. "Dad?" Ben stood up so quickly he almost knocked his chair over. His composure shattered. Tears welled in his eyes instantly, spilling over before he could stop them. "Hey, buddy. Hey, Danny." His voice was thick, cracking on the second syllable. He came around the table and knelt, not quite touching him, as if Danny were a rare bird that might startle. "Look at you. You're so big." Danny broke from Amelia's grip and launched himself forward, wrapping his arms around Ben's neck in a fierce, uncomplicated hug. "You came back." Ben buried his face in his son's shoulder, his whole body shaking with silent, shuddering sobs. He held on like a drowning man. Over Danny's head, his eyes met Amelia's, filled with a gratitude and a grief so profound it was almost frightening. She gave a single, tight nod, her own throat constricting. This was the consequence. This raw, human wreckage. They sat. Danny, once the initial shock wore off, became a chatterbox, telling Ben about school, soccer, the fish he'd seen snorkeling. Ben listened, rapt, wiping his eyes with his napkin, asking gentle questions. He was careful, reverent. He didn't try to be the dad from the past. He was a fascinated guest in his son's present. Amelia watched, a silent moderator. It was simultaneously the most natural and most surreal scene. The easy way Danny accepted him, the hungry, devoted way Ben absorbed every word. It bypassed all the adult complexity and forged a direct, powerful link. Then, halfway through his pancakes, Danny put his fork down. He looked at Ben, then at Amelia, his young face serious with the logic of an 8-year-old. "So, if you're not lost anymore, are you going to come live with us again? Like before?" The air was sucked from the room. The cafe's clatter seemed to fade. Ben's eyes flew to Amelia's, wide with a panic that mirrored her own. This was the trap, sprung not by Ben, but by the simple, devastating arithmetic of a child's heart. Amelia's mind raced. She saw the desperate hope in Ben's face quickly masked. She felt the weight of Danny's expectant gaze. The past and the future collided in this awful, silent moment. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice miraculously light. She reached over and smoothed his hair. "Daddy's just starting his new job here, remember? He has to find a new house and everything. It's not that simple." Danny's face fell. "But why not? We have a house." Ben finally found his voice, soft and strained. "Your mom's right, champ. I've got a lot to figure out. New work, a new place. But I promise, we're going to see each other. A lot. As much as we can." "How much?" Danny pressed, the lawyer in training. Ben looked at Amelia, a silent plea for a number. She gave a slight, almost imperceptible shrug. The logistics were a future problem. "As much as humanly possible," Ben said, his voice gaining a little strength, directed at his son. "I missed too much already. I'm not missing any more." It seemed to satisfy Danny for now. He went back to his syrup, the monumental question temporarily shelved. But the hook was set. The idea was now in Danny's mind, a shining, possible future. The family, whole again. For the rest of the meal, Amelia felt the trap's jaws around her own heart. It wasn't Ben pressuring her. It was the undeniable, beautiful connection between father and son, and the innocent, relentless desire of her child for the most fundamental thing in the world. Saying no to Ben was one thing. Saying no to the radiant hope on Danny's face was a form of cruelty she wasn't sure she had the strength to inflict. They spent the afternoon together, a bizarre, fragile imitation of a family outing. Ben taught Danny how to skip stones on the ocean's edge, his large hands guiding the small ones. Amelia watched from a distance, the ghost of her old life dancing in the sunlight, more real and more dangerous than any phantom that had haunted her before. The trap wasn't made of lies anymore. It was woven from truth, biology, and the sheer, heartbreaking force of a little boy's love. The call came late, after Danny had finally fallen asleep. His dreams likely filled with stone skipping and a father-shaped sun. Amelia's phone glowed on the nightstand. The number was Ben's. She let it ring twice, the vibration humming against the wood, before she slipped out onto the balcony, closing the glass door silently behind her. The Miami night was a warm, velvety blanket, the ocean a dark, rhythmic sigh. "Hello, Ben." His voice was low, earnest, stripped bare. "Amelia, I just had to call. Today was, I don't have the words. Thank you for letting me have that." She leaned on the railing, looking at the distant, winking lights of a cruise ship. "It wasn't for you. It was for him." I know that. But still," he took a shaky breath. "Did you see him? Really see him? When he asked if we could all live together again?" A cold knot tightened in her stomach. "I saw him." "Amelia." His voice dropped to a whisper, charged with a desperate hope. "I know I have no right. I know I destroyed everything. But seeing him today, seeing you, if you could find a way to forgive me, maybe we could, I don't know, start over, slowly. For him. For him. The most potent bait. The justification that could make every compromise, every swallowed betrayal, seem noble. The ghost of the life she'd buried, the family photos, the shared holidays, the comfortable bed with two sides, waved at her from the past. For a dizzying second she imagined it, the relief of no longer being alone, the joy on Danny's face every single morning, the easy, worn-in love they'd once had. But then she saw the other images, projected on the dark canvas of the ocean. Ben's evasive eyes in the months before the accident, the lonely silence of her bed for 3 years, the hollow chill of the memorial service, the way he'd sat in that bar with Ashley. She saw the man who had chosen the clean escape of a fake death over the messy, hard work of confession and facing his family. Her love for him had died a slow death, long before the mountain claimed him. The woman who loved Benjamin Miller had been buried in the ensuing grief. What had risen from that grave was someone else, someone harder, someone who had learned to survive alone. The silence stretched. She could hear his anxious breath on the line. "No," she said. The word was quiet, final. It didn't shatter the night. It settled into it, solid and immovable. "What?" His breath hitched, a wounded sound. "No, Ben. I'm not going to live with you again." "Amelia, please, just think about it. For Danny's sake, we could—" "I am thinking about Danny's sake," she hissed, the calm breaking for a moment. "Do you think a home, built on the foundation of what you did, would be stable? That I could ever look at you across the breakfast table and not see the man who let me think I was a widow? He needs a present, not a haunted house trying to be a home." The truth of it was a clean, sharp blade. She didn't trust him, not with her heart, not with the fragile ecosystem of their daily life. Her forgiveness, if it ever fully came, was for her own peace, not a permission slip back into her bed. "So that's it?" His voice was a broken thing now. "I get to be, what, a weekend dad? After everything?" "You get to be whatever you can build with him," she said, her tone leveling again. "And you get to live with the fact that you are the reason it can't be more. You made this new reality, Ben. Not me. I'm just the one who has to navigate it." There was a long, heavy silence, filled with the hum of distant traffic and the sea. "Is that no? Forever?" he finally asked, the question so small it was almost lost. She looked up at the vast, star-speckled sky, so much bigger than their pain. She thought of Danny's laugh that afternoon, pure and untainted. She thought of the woman who had booked a trip to Miami to feel the sun again. "We'll see," she said. It wasn't a promise. It was a statement of fact. The future was unwritten, but she would be the one holding the pen. She hung up without another word. Back inside, the air conditioning was a shock. She stood in the dark room, listening to Danny's steady, sleeping breath. And then the tears came. They weren't tears for Ben, or for the marriage that had died twice over. They weren't the ragged sobs of 3 years ago. These were silent, hot, and cleansing. They were tears of release, of profound, terrifying freedom. She had walked to the edge of the old, familiar cliff, the one where she sacrificed her own truth for the sake of a man, for the semblance of a family. And she had stepped back. She had said the hardest word. She had chosen herself, and in doing so, she had chosen a healthier, more honest future for her son. The ghost was finally, truly laid to rest, not by a death certificate, but by her own unwavering no. The woman in the mirror the next morning had the same eyes, the same face, but something behind them was different. Lighter. The weight of being Benjamin Miller's widow was gone. The confusion of being the betrayed wife of Benjamin White was receding. She was just Amelia, a mother, a woman who had survived a shipwreck and was now on a sunny Miami balcony, learning how to swim again on her own terms. She packed their bags for the flight home, not with the dread of returning to a hollow life, but with the quiet purpose of returning to a life that was now, irrevocably and completely, her own. The vacation was over. The rest of her life was just beginning